Thank you so much. Welcome once again. Welcome. Once again, we're in Tanzania. And we're blessed to have one and only. But before that, this is Michael Kimathi, your host. And this is Impact Masters in collaboration with Africa Stalking Podcasts. You'll find us on YouTube, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, amongst many other channels such as TikTok, Twitter, and all the channels that you listen to. Our guest today is Purpose Ground in Africa, social innovator, impact business. She has been building startup on creative economy for some time now. And she's also interested in tech for gender, which she'll be telling us more about, and social impact business development. A great speaker and a writer. Don't take my word for it. And she ain't your ordinary executive. A global shaper at WEF Initiative, African Transformation Enabler, social entrepreneur out to build great African business brands. Currently building startup focused on the creative economy, tech for gender, and impact business development. Welcome, Khalila Mbowe, or Kellz if you want. How are you, Kellz?
Hey.
I just had to read that bio so that when I ask about you, you don't tell me that. Yeah, so Kellz, let's start from the beginning. So here we try to tell our African story. Just right from where it started. Where did you start?
Yeah, that's a big one, man.
Yeah.
No, break it down for me, guy. Jeez.
Yeah, where were you born?
I was born here. I was actually not born here in Dar, but I was born in Arusha, Ngarenaro. Yes.
So you know, wale wachuga, they're called what? Archuga.
I have no idea, none. I was born there, and then I was exported to Dar, imported from Arusha. So I grew up here in Dar.
Yeah, those guys have been trending for days. Like, they have their own culture that is really impressive.
Fully.
Yeah. So when you talk about Ngarenaro, that's the first thing comes in my mind.
Archuga.
And there's a way they talk. Do you know how they talk?
I can't even do it. They're like their own country guy. Yes.
Yeah. So did you school here in Dar all your life, or?
Yeah. So I went to school here in Dar. Primary school, I did Olympio. I did academic. I did St. Mary's, and then I went to a place called Sanyaju in Moshi, Vijijini, interior.
That is primary?
No, this was Form 1 and Form 2. I was supposed to go into Form 4 in that school, but I had to jump off because I fell ill. But it was in a village somewhere. To the sense, at that time, we didn't have a fence. I remember the headmistress used to tell us, run away and see where you go. We didn't need the fence, because where do you go? So I went to school there, and then I came back to Dar, St. Mary. So largely I schooled in TZ.
In Dar es Salaam.
Yeah.
Okay. In TZ.
TZ.
Basically Dar es Salaam. So how was that experience like, going for, the normal schools, as you call them, which I feel like at some point they were not that normal. Is St. Mary's public?
St. Mary's is a private school. So I have a feeling I was a pioneer in all the schools I went to, one of the pioneers. So academic, right now what academic international school is not what it was when I was a student at academic. I was a student at academic when it was literally a classroom in somebody's garage. It was a startup. It was a startup when I was a student.
Yeah.
We had little desks. That's when I was a student at academic. And St. Mary's, I joined St. Mary's when it was in its first year. The founder of St. Mary's at that time, she used to come pick us there was this little rundown heist. And she used to pick up each student and we'd go in the early morning, we'd go to a bakery to get bread. That would be the bread that we'd use during break time. And so bread, and then we'd go to shops and buy margarine with her. Then we'd go all the way to school. It was like that.
Yeah. Sounds like fun. So were you like this laid back kid or just outgoing as you are right now?
Okay, so in my head, I was very outgoing. In my mind, I was very outgoing.
Yeah.
I love people, but I'm one of those. I'm an introvert. I love my own space completely, and I'd love to sit down, read, and do nothing. I mean, if I did not see humans for 2 months, I'd be fine. 100%. I'm just like, I love you people, but I can take a holiday from human being. But at the same time, I love connecting with people, which is quite the paradox. But anyway, so I was a child who loved to connect, but I didn't know how to. I didn't know how to because of the way I think about things, the way I relate to things, the way I perceive things. I receive information, they go into my head, and the way they come out is very different from a way a lot of the other children used to see it. And so as a kid, I'd say I was the odd one out always. Always. I remember being bullied in school.
Were you bullied?
I was bullied, guy.
That is in high school?
And no, this is in primary school.
Which class?
I was bullied from grade 3, grade 2, 3, 4. And also because in St. Mary's at that time, I was one of the few kids who could speak English. And it's not, somebody would be like, oh, you spoke English because you went to these schools. No, I spoke English because my mom was a Chaga woman who made sure I could speak the language.
How did she do that?
So she had this Chaga accent, but she realized that we love to read very early on, and she instilled that culture very early on. Kwanzaa, there was no choice. There was no TV. We didn't have TV.
Yeah.
And so there were books. So she would buy books. Yeah. And we used to love reading books. And then I was raised by a single mom, by the way. And, she had very modest earnings. And I say modest with a capital and underlying there, that kind of life. And she used little money that she had, and she bought a cassette recorder. And so what she used to tell us is read, then record yourself reading, then listen to yourself.
Wow.
Right.
That's how you practiced
pronouncing
the words right?
That's a memory that I have. I do not know at what point, but kind of that's where I picked it up. That's where I picked it up. And then also another thing is every single time we did manage to go to a house of somebody who owned a TV, news was in English. Tom and Jerry was not speaking in Swahili.
True.
Tom was speaking in English.
Yeah.
The Burbies were in English. Everything was in English. So in my mind, everything great is in English. Yeah. And then when you happen to watch news with the adults, it is shambles. I remember there was a show on ITV called Madira ya Wiki, I think, something like that. And it was about the potholes. It was about corruption. It was about somebody killed something. And as a child, I'm like, I don't want this. This is not the life I want. Yeah. And so, of course, I gravitated. And of course, this is like very childhood thinking. I gravitated to everything that I felt was positive. At that time, it was English focused. And so I found myself really moving in that direction.
Wow, that's fascinating, because given what you're doing right now, it starts to make sense that this started from somewhere. And your mom is still there, right?
My mom passed in 2013.
How was she with your siblings? How would you describe her?
So my mother was a visionary. She was very innovative. She was a storyteller. She was a fireball. I'd say, so we say God never makes mistakes, but she was born in the wrong country. Honestly.
She was that good.
She was that good. For what my mom brought to the table and what the circumstances she was born in gave to her, I believe that if she had been in a different environment, she would have done amazing things for this world. And that was the kind of person she was. And of course, just like me, she was not understood. For her to fit in anywhere, she had to try so hard. And, now in retrospect, I can think of things that my mom used to do and think, guy,
So-
she had a hard time.
Yeah. So you feel you're not understood.
Oh, I mean, most times, right? And much better nowadays. I used to have one of my prayer points, right? When I was younger, I say, God, teach me how to make friends, because I don't understand these people and they don't understand me. Like, teach me, like, what do I say? And so networking activities used to be, and to some point right now still are, just a point of anxiety. I'm like, I don't want to talk to you because I'm going to ask you for something real. And a lot of people don't want to have authentic conversations.
Yeah. People are living a lie.
People are living the life that they feel they should be living. But I'm like, let's try to have a real conversation. And one of the things I really appreciate about people, by the way, and I have to say I appreciate about you as well, is we can have like a real conversation.
Yeah.
You are annoyingly honest.
We got punished for that not long time ago. I'll tell you off the mic. I don't wanna be blocked from leaving this country, but I'll tell you that now that you're talking about honesty. But I feel also people should appreciate honesty because that moves you forward.
Right.
In a good way. So, but what can you do? You can't control other people's wishes and how they live.
Right.
Yeah. So you finished high school here in Dar, right?
I finished high school, yes, here in Dar, St. Mary's.
Did you go to UDSM or?
No, I did not. I was not going to. I was done. One of the really funny stories, when I was in Form 6 here in TZ, when I was in Form 6, I remember there's a class that I went to, and I'm not going for classmates who was with me that remember this story, but there was a teacher who used to find offense in the fact that I used to ask many questions.
In English?
It was English medium, but then I used to ask questions. Okay. So the teacher would teach, and I'm like, well, I think I've read somewhere else, and what you're saying is not necessarily factual. And so I would ask a question. And
You made enemies with your teacher?
Kweli, they made enemies with me.
With you?
Me, I'm just asking a question. As a student, I am asking...
You are curious to learn.
Yes, and my curiosity was punished severely. I remember being in Form 4, and we had an English exercise to do.
Yeah.
And I remember for the first time, I was like, I was at one of my uncle's house, and my uncle owned a computer. Do you know, having a computer at home? I was in the clouds. And I was like, let me type this homework. I typed it. For the first time in my life, that was my first typewritten assignment, and I printed it. I was feeling like $1 million. Mimi. Yani Bill Gates was me. It was me. And I went to school and submitted it. Yeah. And I had researched. And for the first time, I had references. It was so good. You know what the teacher told me? He told me, he said, how dare you bring something, bring this work, and how dare you not write with your hand? And I said, well, I've done 1, 2, 3. And he said, I remember being in the staff room, and he said, oh, you didn't follow instructions. And I said, I wasn't at school. So actually, the homework that we got a little bit before. So we got like 2 weeks before I submitted it, and my classmates submitted it a week that I wasn't in school because I was ill.
Yeah.
And I said, I wasn't there when you're giving further instructions, but here's my work. And he said, if you felt you couldn't submit the work that was demanded, you should have died. I will never forget that man. Ever.
That's so cruel.
I was like, I should have died because I typed an assignment, and you don't want me to submit it in the way I've submitted it. Yeah, so it's comments like that. And some teachers can be really cruel. And the kind of seed they plant in students, those are seeds that, unless, intervention happens, a lot of young people do not get over that. And those are the things that actually stifle innovation. Because people want to start something new, but you remember something somebody crazy and completely insecure about themselves told you, and you don't move along.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's crazy. Yeah, I hear you, and for sure, if someone said that at that level, I can only imagine what went through your head, and that you can't even forget it. So
I cried.
Yeah. And by the way, do you know what is common? Do you know what is common with the innovators? All of them have traumatizing stories or life that they lived in their past, and it should not be like that.
Right.
I think. So that is the bad experience in your high school, right?
Do you have a traumatizing story?
I do.
Okay.
A lot of them, not
Yeah.
even one. Yeah. Stories for days. Maybe I'll record soon. I keep telling all my guests that I'll do the podcast about myself. But the only problem I've not found a host.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'm here. I shall travel all the way.
Yeah.
Right.
My stories are really, really crazy. Yeah. Not that crazy. Maybe I think they're crazy, but maybe not that crazy.
I know a few of them.
Oh, you do?
A few of them.
Ah.
Yes.
Okay.
I've heard a bit of your story.
You have?
I have. From your own lips.
Maybe
Yes.
that time we should have recorded.
We should have.
It could have made this easier.
But no.
Yeah.
It is great because now we have a podcast waiting. Yes.
Sounds good. Let's make plans. But Kellz, that's the bad side of high school per se, or even primary. What's the good side? What's that one thing or two things or three things that actually you remember in your high school or primary school that really even stop the bullying, right?
I feel like you're putting me on the spot.
Please, if you don't want to answer, say so.
Because I can't remember anything.
You can't remember the good things?
I think, primary school, I was the nerd. I loved reading. I loved, so I don't want to tell bullying stories because I feel like it's kind of this victim mentality. But I remember this particular time when I was in boarding school. I remember I was in grade 4. You know, these traumatizing incidents you remember. And even some of the people who did some of those things I meet nowadays, and I'm like, I remember. Of course I don't tell them, but yeah. But I remember saying something or asking a question that somebody felt was offensive, which was really silly because in my head I was making a joke. It was a joke.
Yeah.
And she got the entire boys' dormitory and the girls' dormitory to follow. You know how kids follow you in a crowd and they're jeering you? Right. And others were doing this, like they're recording. And they're like, others were acting like the paparazzi. It's like my downfall.
Yeah.
I was in grade 4. And also it could be because I was in grade 4. How old was I in grade 4? I started grade 1 at 4 years old. So grade 4, I was 8. So I was really young.
That's still another bad experience.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
So basically, again, primary school, I think, what I think was great about primary school, despite all the fracas, was there was this Kenyan teacher called Mr. Moses. And I remember his wife, Madam Elizabeth. I can never forget this too.
Yeah.
Wherever they are, guys, you guys made an impact in my life. And he was always the person I could run to. Whenever I was bullied.
Yeah.
And somehow he saw something different in me.
Yeah.
So I started doing public speaking when I was in grade 4. I'd get opportunities to write poems and perform them at the assembly or at the school's activities, which I was bullied for by students, by the way. So the teachers would be like, woohoo, great, Kellz. And then you get off stage and your fellow students say, oh, you think you're old hat, umefanya vibaya.
So they are envious or jealous?
God, at that point I didn't understand it, but I hated myself for it. Right, as a kid, you want approval from your friends.
Yeah.
You see, so. But I do remember Mr. Moses and Miss Elizabeth, and every single time we had a performance, I used to love to dance, still do. She'd put me in, and every time I danced, she'd really applaud that. And then, of course, all the students would be like, "Oh, nacheza sana, you're doing it too much. You shouldn't do." Gosh, people can be cruel. And by the way, one of the things I want to say, the reason most children are cruel is because they get it from their parents. I'm gonna leave that there.
So they don't do things that they don't see every day.
They learn these things. Children learn these things.
Yeah.
Moving on, that's not the point of the story. In high school, I'd say, again, being surrounded, every single time you find, there'd always be one person who would see what you could do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And try to push you in that direction. I'd say I had a lot of that in Mr. Moses and Madam Elizabeth. I'd say in high school or secondary school. You know, in Tanzania, secondary school is from 1 to form 4, and then high school is from 5 and 6.
It used to be like that in East Africa, but it changed.
You abandoned the system.
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, so people do 4 years in university instead of 2 like before 3. But that's changing back for some reason. So you have what they're calling CBC.
Okay.
Which is divided into like 4 segments.
Yeah.
So there's lower primary. I mean, you start like PP1, PP2, and PP3, I think.
Yeah.
And then you go to lower primary up to standard 4, and then you graduate. Then go to upper primary school or something. Then you do 3 years up to class 7, and then you join lower high school for 2 years, and then another 3 years. Kind of mumbled out there.
I do know in TZ they're working on scraping off the standard 7.
Yeah.
So
They
you'll
do
be,
what?
I mean, standard 7. So it's grade 1 to 6, and then you move on to secondary school. That's something that is in the works currently.
Yeah. So I feel some type of way of the way we adopt some of these kind of curriculums, the way they change. Because even for us, I think we're borrowing from Finland or something. They do CBC, where it's curriculum-based, CBC, curriculum-based something. And I feel like, yes, maybe the 844 system did not work, which I took, which I'm more familiar with, but it's competitive, and then you get to explore the world and then expertise on what you have explored across the world. But when you say you're testing people from their, talent or what they're interested in, then you ought to limit them from what they can do, or even limit the career growth for some reason. So, that's my opinion, and I think maybe I stand corrected. But also something else I found with that CBC is that it's too expensive for parents, given the macroeconomics that are going throughout the world. Yeah. So I feel like if you're not really well off, you're still disadvantaged. More disadvantaged because even when you're tested, you're not tested amongst everyone. It's just like segments of that test goes to different divisions, which really doesn't give you the real picture of someone's intellectual. Yeah, so there's that. But of course, since now we were told we are leaders of tomorrow, and we are here now, we are leaders, it's something actually we should be having more and more, and try to see the best way. So you go to high school. Yeah,
go to high school. I think just building on what you said, if I just reflect back, I think there is a critical need to teach children how to think. Teach children how to think. Teach children how to coexist positively with others, and coexist in a way that you can actually create solutions together rather than compete, which is basically what the systems right now are geared to do. I see you as competition, and hence I'm going to react as per that perception, right? And so that in itself, it breeds a culture, that culture of toxic competitiveness also breeds an atmosphere where children are bullied in school, right? But then also, one of the things that, again, high school, one of the things that I appreciate about my experience outside of high school was the fact that I read books. I think books was always my escape, always my escape.
For all nerds.
Pardon?
For all nerds.
For all nerds. Books were my escape. I remember just locking myself in spaces and just reading, and dreaming of a different and adverse reality consistently. And I remember doing skits and doing things in front of my mirror at home. We had this little cracked up mirror. The entire house would share this really cracked up mirror. And I remember whenever there was nobody at home, I'd do things in front of the mirror, just imagining that I was in a completely different world than the one that I had to be in. Because one of the things that we don't talk about is the fact that even in the systems that we create, and I'm not talking about just in school, but even in the homes, we force kids to, what's the word? To conform to a certain to the limits of what we as parents have been exposed to.
Yeah.
Basically, our children are conformed to the limits of our own exposure as parents. And if we do not take it upon ourselves to keep exposing ourselves to new ways of thinking, to new ways of being, to new ways of parenting, to new ways of, innovating and allowing our minds to be creative, our children are also confined.
Yeah.
And so there's no way when a child comes to you and says, and people think exposure is traveling and going, to different countries and exploring different nationalities, but that's not it.
Yeah.
Exposure is actually even just reading a book and sitting down and having a meaningful conversation about something different. It's having a conversation, seeing a pothole and saying, hey, let's get together and talk about how do we make sure that potholes on the streets are no more. It's like, let's research, let's do something together. You're exposing my mind to a different way of thinking. You're having the neural pathways in a child's mind get to explore right further. And also being able to say, well, I do... Sometimes I nachekaga sana. I like when you have a parent and you're like, so what does your child want to be when they grow up? And they're like, I want them to be like me. I'm like, why? But why do you want them to be like you? But who are you? Why do you want them to be like you? And I feel that we can be, and even as teachers, we can be very selfish in our ambitions.
Yeah.
And anyway, positive side of high school is the books. All the way to, I'm just going to jump to university because I literally cannot remember many positive things except for the books. And also they're friends, at the end of the day, it's the circle that you have.
Yeah.
And I did get to try out different things, and I'm really grateful for that, for the people that held me down. But then moving into university, I did not do university in Tanzania. I did university in Taylor's University campus in Malaysia. Wakati huo, back then when there were very few Africans in Malaysia is when we were there. But before going to uni, I did a gap year, right? And I did a gap year because, we couldn't afford university. My mom couldn't afford it. So I had to find ways to work. And so I did work in that year. I got into... that's when I began my career in advertising and marketing. I started off as a creative assistant in my mom's company, or a company that my mom was heading. And then I got into copywriting. So I worked with an advertising agency called FCB, Food Court and Building. It is normal in TZ. I don't know about South Africa where it was founded. But I was doing copywriting for Vodacom advertising. This was 2007.
Yeah.
And then I went on to being executive, what do you call it? Account executive for Vodacom advertising within that agency, handling Vodacom adverts. And then from there, I went to uni.
So what did this gap year teach you now that you're earning a living and working?
I got to explore.
Okay.
I got to explore my writing. Listen, how I got the job? Michael, this is a funny story. Yahoo Messenger.
Please tell
Every time I tell people about Yahoo Messenger, people don't know about it. Yahoo Messenger was the bomb.com.
I know about it.
I know you know. Yeah. Yahoo was the bomb. It was. We had chat rooms and everything.
Yeah.
And so I was on Yahoo Messenger. And I remember going into different chat rooms that were very much aligned with some of the thinking that I had. And I'd go in and people would just come into these spaces and argue for the sake of arguing. And I'm like, well, I like that you said that. However, here's a different way of thinking. And I'd share these things on different messenger groups. Yeah. And I remember this one day, a gentleman on Yahoo Messenger, I don't even remember what the conversation was about, Michael. Yeah. And then he asked me, hey, are you free? And I said, for what? By me, I was snappy. I was like, free for what? For who? Who are you talking to me? I was like, hey, me. Listen, I was not having it. I'm like, you shall not talk to me like this online. Do you know me? Do you know me? I was like, you cannot. You cannot talk to me just like how. But then he's like, I'm like, there is a job opportunity. We're looking for a copywriter at FCB. Are you able to come to, it was PPF Tower right now? And I said, copywriter, in my mind, I have no idea what a copywriter does. I'm like, I just saw writer. That's
and you're interested
as a writer.
I used to write a lot.
I still do.
Yeah.
And so I said, And by the way, this day nilikuwa nimetoka, my mom had sent us out to do research because I was working for a company at that time. We had done research, and research on ground. I was wearing sandals. So trust me, my legs were a different color, the color of the soil. Because I was doing surveys from morning to evening. So by the time I go back nilikuwa, And so I said I was coming, rushed into the bathroom, cleaned my feet, got on a bus, and then I went to town.
That's Dala Dala.
Dala Dala, got on a Dala Dala matatu. And then got to PPF Tower. Remember, I stopped at Postam Yazamani, walked to PPF Tower, and then I asked, what's a copywriter?
From the guy or the
from the guy. From the guy, because he met me at the ground floor, took me up. It's like, we've been interviewing for a copywriter all day, we haven't found somebody. I think.
And how did he know you? Just
Yahoo Messenger.
You guys were chatting?
No. He used to be in the chat room, so he used to see my responses.
Okay.
Literally, that was it.
Okay.
So he used to see my responses. And so he's like, I think you'd be very good at it. He's like, you have witty comments. And I'm like, I don't even understand witty comments. Me was just saying, I was just responding.
Just being you.
Yeah, I was just being me.
From the books.
I don't do anything.
To the chats.
And so I was